東京大学受験リスニングトレーニング
Listening section.
I want to start by pushing back on the conventional narrative that globalization uniformly benefits all participants. The data from the World Bank's 2005 development report shows that while global GDP did swell, that is, expand dramatically, during the post-1990 liberalization era, the gains were extraordinarily uneven. Countries that managed to assemble competitive export manufacturing sectors, like South Korea and China, captured disproportionate shares of that growth. Meanwhile, many Sub-Saharan African economies actually saw their share of global trade contract. So the premise that open trade networks distribute prosperity automatically is, I'd argue, empirically unsupported.
I see your point about uneven distribution, but I think that framing assumes trade structure is static, which isn't entirely true. What your analysis overlooks is that the composition of global trade networks does not simply collect wealth at established nodes. It continuously rotates, shifting comparative advantage from one region to another over time. Vietnam and Bangladesh, for instance, were essentially absent from global manufacturing networks in 1990. By 2017, they had burst onto the scene as major exporters precisely because rising wages in China stirred a reallocation of production. That's not failure. That's a system that, however imperfectly, absorbs and redistributes industrial capacity. The problem isn't the network itself. It's the speed of adjustment and the absence of domestic policy buffers.
Let's pause and consider both arguments carefully before we go further. Alex, your point about the swelling of global GDP masking distributional asymmetries is well taken. Concentration of gains is a documented phenomenon. Sarah, your observation about dynamic rotation of comparative advantage is equally valid, and the Vietnam and Bangladesh examples are empirically solid. However, I'd argue you're both overlooking a structural dimension that complicates both positions. The real issue is not simply whether networks expand or rotate. It is who controls the architecture of those networks. By 2017, a handful of multinational platforms, what economists call global value chain orchestrators, had effectively assembled the dominant nodes of world trade under their governance. These actors don't merely collect tariffs or trade rents, they set the terms by which other countries may participate. When geopolitical tensions subsequently erupted, as they did with the US-China trade dispute from 2018 onward, they didn't just upset bilateral relations. They destabilized entire supply chains, triggering what I describe as an economic burst, a sudden, disruptive release of accumulated tension that crams instability into multiple economies simultaneously. The question worth examining, therefore, is not whether globalization benefits participants on average, but whether the current architecture concentrates structural power in ways that make the system fundamentally fragile.
Granted, the orchestrator argument is compelling, but I'd push it further. If structural power is concentrated in a few platform actors, then smaller economies aren't merely disadvantaged, they're cram-loaded with risk they never agreed to absorb. The asymmetry isn't accidental, it's architectural. And that's precisely what upsets any naive equilibrium model of trade.
I partially agree, but that framing risks overstating helplessness. Regional coalitions like ASEAN's collective bargaining posture since 2015 show that smaller actors can assemble countervailing influence when they act in concert. The network can be stirred, meaning its structural dynamics can be actively disrupted by coordinated multilateral pressure, not just by dominant platform actors. So fragility isn't predetermined.
Sarah and Alex, you've both sharpened the core tension well. Looking at this from a historical perspective, every major phase of trade network expansion, from the 19th century colonial system to Bretton Woods to the WTO era, has featured the same contest between structural concentration and coalition-based resistance. The deeper lesson may be that the architecture of globalization is never neutral. It always reflects and reinforces particular distributions of power. Whether smaller actors can truly stir that architecture, disrupt it from within, or whether they are ultimately absorbed into its logic remains, I think, the defining empirical question for international political economy in the coming decade.
Question section. Answers and explanations.